Former President Donald Trump was indicted today for trying to overturn his loss to Joe Biden.
We have to win in November, or we're not going to have Pennsylvania. They'll change the name. They're going to change the name of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvanians have a unique role with democracy and freedom. We have seen Pennsylvanians rise up at the ballot box.
The work of making this world resemble one that you would prefer to live in is a lunch pail job.
Welcome to the Keystone Reckoning podcast. I'm your host, Jesse White. Today is January 6, 2022, 1 year from the violent attempt to overthrow our democracy at the United States Capitol. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, this is a day that matters to you for all the right reasons. But as we sit 1 year out, I think it's really important to take a step back and look at just where have we come in a year, and more importantly, where are we going? And to that end, I've put together a few questions, kind of a top 5 questions that I don't think we have the answers to quite yet, or that we need to answer. And I'm going to just run through them in no particular order. But I'm going to preface all of this by saying we have to really start looking at this through a specific lens. And that lens is that Democrats need to realize, from a messaging point of view, that it's not a matter of helping people realize how close we got to an actual coup 1 year ago. Because the problem is the folks that really need to understand that, or perhaps don't understand that, are the ones that are complicit by their silence. And, the remainder of the people are the ones that realize maybe more than we do, as people that were, rooting on the insurrectionists. They realize more than most how close they came. So I think this idea that if we could just make everybody aware that democracy is in jeopardy, that's going to somehow fix it, is a very, very misguided concept. Because the people that want to destroy our democracy know damn well what they're doing. They know damn well how close they came. And if you think that trying to shame them by shining a light on it is going to dissuade them from future actions, you are hopelessly naive. We all are. The Republican Party is, as currently constituted, a party of, as far as I see it, anarchists and white supremacists. And, people will say, oh, you can't paint everybody with such a broad brush. Well, here's the thing. The party is electing these people. They are tolerating these people. They are defending these people. So that's where you come to the key terms, of silence equals complicity. And until we see some shred of leadership from the party or prominent members of the party, then that's the mantle that they have to bear. Plain and simple. You look at someone like Liz Cheney, who has really stepped up in terms of trying to hold people accountable and to shine a light on just how horrific these attacks were, and kind of the seamy underbelly of what's happening in the party. And what does the Republican Party do? They basically excommunicate her. Well, that tells you pretty much all you need to know. There is no room for a dissenting voice in that party, even from someone who's and I hesitate to use the word pure, but a pure Republican bloodline is Dick Cheney. I mean, if you'd have said 15 years ago that Dick Cheney's daughter wasn't Republican enough, that's terrifying. So we need to be clear about this. They have no shame, and the more we try to appeal to logic and reason and cite the rule of law, they're oblivious to it. They've come to a point where they simply refuse to acknowledge it, and they are the people at the top of the pyramid know what they're doing. They know this is their easiest way to grab power. It's the quickest path. And the people at the bottom of the pyramid have basically joined a cult. And, members of a cult are notoriously not known for listening to logic and reason. There's a reason they joined the damn thing to begin with. So with that said, let's take a look at these few questions. And the first one is one that really sticks with me, and I don't think it's really been addressed enough, at least not publicly. I have a feeling that we'll be hearing more about it once the January 6th Select Committee begins their public hearings. But the question is, what did the rioters hope to accomplish if they actually had reached Democratic members of Congress? Let's say when they broke into Nancy Pelosi's office, she was there. What exactly were they going to do? What if they had gotten to Mike Pence? What exactly was the plan? Were they going to hold them hostage in exchange for a demand that Trump somehow be instated as president, or the electoral count go his way? There's no doubt in my mind that there are but not all, but some, and it frightens me to think of what the percentage might be of these people would have absolutely caused bodily harm to Democratic leaders if given the opportunity. If they had the quote unquote clear shot, would they have taken it? And this is again where you look at the cultism, because if it's been drilled into your head that Nancy Pelosi is an enemy of the state, which is the way that the Republicans have framed this, she is not the leader of the political opposition. She is a leader of a national opposition. Republicans have abandoned the concept that we are that there is room for a vocal or a loyal minority. They just that is no longer a concept, which is stunning that that's kind of fallen away in such a short period of time. One of the things that our democracy was founded on was the idea that you have this, the minority party in terms of control politically still remains loyal to the nation. And there's a unwritten, I guess maybe it is written if you really want to get into the Constitution, but there's an understanding that at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. And that has gone away. And therefore you see the hostility and you see the violence, because in the minds of these folks, the Democrats are not Americans. We're communists, we're socialists, we're fascists. They're, you can interchange all the terms that they don't understand. But the point is, we are not them. We are less than somehow. We are different in a threatening way, which, by the way, dovetails beautifully into the white supremacy, kind of argument. And, just to reiterate that there is very little to no room to appeal to these people is, the word supremacy should be a huge tip off that there's not going to be a lot of reasoning. If you have someone who believes they are by definition supreme to another human being based on race, ethnicity, whatever, that's a pretty firm stance, right? If I say I am supreme, you've pretty much established what your pecking order is. And there's not a lot of wiggle room there. So again, none of this should come as a surprise. I mean, these things all tie together. But no one's answered the question yet. What did the rioters hope to accomplish? What was the end game? Where could this have gone? And I think part of the reason we haven't talked about it is because the answer is terrifying. But honestly, it's a miracle that it didn't happen. But what would they have done? had they gotten their hands on Nancy Pelosi. It's important to think about. Number 2, will there ever be true accountability for Donald Trump and his inner circle? This is a tough one, and Merrick Garland, Attorney General Merrick Garland, spoke yesterday and basically told everybody, be patient. We have to build a case. Wherever we're going to go, wherever the evidence leads us to, whoever it may lead us to, but you have to be patient because it's a process. And he's right. And the thing is, there's, the higher up the food chain you go, the more ironclad your case has to be. The worst thing that would happen would be to bring a half-ass case against Donald Trump or whoever, and then have it fall apart. That simply can't happen. And, we all know how these things work. It's like building a case against the mob. You start with your low-hanging fruit and you get somebody to turn on somebody else, and you want the big fish. We all know who the big fish are. So in terms of legally, do I think there's enough there to ultimately make a criminal case? Absolutely. I think the volume of what we as the public don't know yet, but probably we'll find out in the coming weeks and months once the January 6th committee begins their hearings, I think it's going to knock us over. But the bigger question is about accountability is, do we as a party, do we as a country have the fortitude to take that step to criminally charge a president of the United States, which has never happened before? And knowing the politically charged environment in which it's occurring, I'm sure there are people out there that will believe strongly that it's just too dangerous to do it. That given the ferocity of Trump supporters and their, quite frankly, their ignorance of legal processes, that you run the risk of creating a martyr. And it's a valid concern. And I have no doubt that if, he were to be indicted, it would be an absolute shit show. And it would be dangerous. There's no doubt about it. It would definitely bring us to a place that we haven't been for a year. And it will take us definitely into uncharted territory. By definition, it takes us into uncharted territory. But this is one of those areas where the cost of inaction in the long run is much greater than the price you pay in the short run. Because if everything Trump has done to subvert and try to dismantle our democracy goes unpunished, then you have set the precedent and you are inviting the next one, the next Trump. And, what I've said all along is the best thing that's ever, the one good thing about Trump is that he's always been really bad at politics. He's put together this immense amount of power, but he's just so personally incapable of wielding it in the right way to maximize the political damage he could have done. If you put a strategic mind of like a Mitch McConnell in that position, that political cunning to go along with Trump's total lack of shame, total lack of respect for any sort of political norms, now you've got real problems. Not that we don't have real problems now, but we'll have gone to a very different place. And the next Donald Trump will not be so stupid in that regard. There's going to be a vetting process. They're all, you can see it. They're all fighting to see who's going to be the next Donald Trump. Is it going to be Josh Hawley? Is it going to be, whoever? The next one will be better at it, which means we have to get this one right. So, despite the consequences, there has to be accountability. There just has to be. Number 3 is, do voters and does the public realize how close we actually came to a coup. If you see the news today in Kazakhstan, there are massive uprisings, political uprisings. Airports have been seized. The president, who's basically a dictator in all but name, has shut down the internet. Who has done all of the things that dictators do when they're trying to quell legitimate civil unrest. You look at that and you say, oh my God, how terrible would it be to live in a place like that? And then you turn around and be like, wait a minute, where the hell do we live? We're not much better at this point. And the only thing that's held it together, I think, is the fact that we've been able to cling to the norms and the history that we have that, quite frankly, a lot of countries just don't have. They're just not as established enough. You have these countries that are, basically in the grand scheme of things, brand new. They're rewriting their constitution every 7 minutes. They don't have the benefit of their institutions having kind of gelled to a place where they're respected. And it really is crazy when you look at how close we came to going to a place that we may never have been able to come back from. We may have already gone to that place, by the way, in terms of eroding confidence in our institutions, by embracing the big lie and all those sorts of things. But I think that we have, as Americans, have fallen into this place of naivete in terms of our comfort level, where we think, well, this is, we may, the boat may swing one side to port or starboard, but we're never going to sink. And, how has that worked out when you say you have an unsinkable ship? Trump is Trump and his cult, they're the iceberg. And we came closer than anybody, I think, that's not very politically astute to just the average low information voter or the non-voter. I don't think they have a clue as to how close we came to having it all fall apart. And that's a very dangerous thing, which leads me into the next question. And this is the kind of the political solution is, will Democrats do what is necessary to protect the voting rights and processes to prevent these things from happening again? You're hearing some talk among Republicans about revising and updating the Electoral College Act, which is, the kind of the loophole that Trump tried to utilize in order to have alternate slates of electors appointed, and to try to convince Vice President Pence that there was a path to allow him to exercise judgment over what should be a routine reporting of the Electoral College results. I mean, that law was written in the 1800s. It was actually written to an entirely different time, an entirely different set of circumstances, and it was clearly never intended to be subjective. The results are designed to be objective. So there's that piece of it. And I think even Republicans in Congress may end up getting on board with that in some degree, because they see that as that's a fatal flaw in the process. But that alone isn't going to solve it. I mean, we all know that where this is going. This has to do with voter suppression. It has to do with the Republicans allowing partisan political appointees, to be election officials instead of independent or elected folks in different areas. These are the things that what they're doing is, I think if I were doing an after action report of how the Republicans handled the 2020 election and what went wrong from their point of view, not with the election itself so much, but with the process of challenging the results and the litigating and everything that went on. They lacked the infrastructure to execute their plans. I'm going to repeat that. They lack the infrastructure to execute their plans. So what have they done? They're going about building that infrastructure for future elections. And they're doing it in some very obvious ways if you know what you're looking at. First of all, there's a Politico piece today about 50 some people that were involved in the insurrection or running for office, including here in Pennsylvania. You have Doug Mastriano, who's running for governor. Rick Saccone running for lieutenant governor. So they're trying to put those people into positions of political power. But more importantly, they're changing state laws to undo the independent oversight of the election process itself. That's the scary part, because the only thing that prevented the worst case scenario from happening in 2020 was that there were a handful of public servants, the Secretary of State of Georgia and a few other people that did their jobs as prescribed by law. If those people have been replaced by partisan hacks and yes men, then we're screwed. We're absolutely screwed. So it turns to, what do we do from a political point of view? And the answer is obvious. We passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And, clearly this is setting up a showdown. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer has said that they want to do a vote on Martin Luther King Day to amend the rules to get around the filibuster to allow this to happen. It came out yesterday that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have not agreed to that. The argument is simple. If states can use a simple majority to change their election laws, then the federal government should be able to do the same and protect the voting rights with the same simple majority. Oh, and by the way, it's just also the common sense right thing to do. And let's not pretend for a second, if the shoe was on the other foot, that Republicans wouldn't go around the filibuster in order to make this happen. I think that's such a massive fallacy that that Republicans respect the filibuster or the procedure, the precedent of the Senate whenever it, no matter what. I mean, how did that work out for Merrick Garland when it was time to appoint Supreme Court justices? I mean, that right there should be the only argument you ever need, that, with all due respect, fuck the rules, in terms of, the rules can be changed by who's in charge. And Republicans are very good at that. When they're in charge and they don't like the rules, they just change the rules or they just ignore the rules. Changing the rules via a vote is not in any way inappropriate. That's exactly how the filibuster came to be. It's a rule. And the for a ruling body to allow itself to be handcuffed by its own rules is absolutely insane. And I get the idea that it should be hard for things to get through as a way to kind of filter out bad ideas and bad legislation. I mean, I think in a lot of ways that's bullshit, but that's conversation for another day. This is one of those times where Manchin and Sinema, quite frankly, just need to get the hell on board. There is, in my mind, no reasonable excuse that they can give. I don't care how it plays in their home states. I don't care about anything. This is by far clearly the right thing to do. And it is not being overly reactive. It is a proportional response to an existential threat. This is not a power grab. This is not overreaching. This is acknowledging what is happening right in front of your eyes and using the power that you have been given by the American people to fix it before it gets worse. That is it. That is the sum total of this debate. That's it. And for them not to do it, not to go along with it, is indefensible in any way, shape, or form. Because sometimes when you are an elected member of a legislative body, you have to acknowledge that sometimes, despite your ego that can barely fit under the Capitol dome, there are things that are bigger than you. They're bigger than you. They will outlast you. Nobody is bigger than the game. And sure as hell, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are not bigger than the game. So whatever needs to happen, as much as I want to see Build Back Better passed and all these other things, those would be great and they're essential. But the Voting Rights Act is beyond essential. This if we fail to act in this moment, it will be looked back upon as a colossal failure of governance. Colossal. Especially given the fact that Democrats ostensibly, the only thing that's blocking the Democrats from doing this are the Democrats themselves, which is like the most Democrat thing ever, right? Okay, so that's that question, is how are we going to get those things passed? And the last question is, what happens if we don't? What are we going to do when this all goes south? Even further south, and people start to activate, and and people say, "Oh, that's crazy. That's never going to happen." The hell, it's not. It's not hard to see where this goes. If Democrats are going to spend the next 2 years banging the drum, democracy's on the ballot. Democracy's on the ballot. The problem is, I fear as though it's going to fall on deaf ears to the people that need to hear it. And the people that have already blocked it out they're gearing up. They're getting ready, and they're just becoming more militant. And, they're so convinced that Joe Biden is destroying America, yet they're unable to give any concrete examples of how or why. That just can't, that requires an intellectual, factual debate. And that's just not where they live. It's just not going to happen. So, they're doing this, they're governing and they're doing this on their terms. So when, the next group of insurrectionists, basically issue their call to arms, and, people living in housing developments, all of a sudden are, cleaning their guns in the front lawn and getting ready. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's not crazy. Because there are enough of these folks out there that truly believe that they are, revolutionaries, and that this is their God-given right. And that, again, that the other side, instead of a loyal opposition, are enemies of the state. So what are the people that are in the middle that, I can't be bothered with politics. It's too toxic. I don't get involved in that, that have exercised their privilege to step away from the political debate? What are they going to do? Because if they don't vote now, which is the easy step, the next step is much, much messier and much more complicated. So those are 5 things to ponder as we look back on this historic day. And I realize that none of them are particularly cheerful to think about. But we have to. This is one of those things where who knows what January 6, 2021 will look like in the long game of history. Is this going to be our moment when the Visigoths came over the hill and signaled the official beginning of the end of the Roman Empire? I don't know. Nobody knows. We can guess, but there's just no way to know. But we have to be cognizant of what's happened before so we can plan for what happens next. And what we do in these next intervening months will go a very long way towards determining what that history is going to look like. So we have the power in our hands, but it is fleeting, and we may not get an opportunity again for a very long time if we don't do what we need to do here. And that means being aggressively messaging to everybody in different ways, talking to people in the language they understand, and not being afraid to take a hard stand and say, no, not everybody. You can't put everybody into, they're all corrupt basket. It doesn't work like that. There are clear differences here. And let's talk about, what does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be a loyal citizen of a country? Reintroducing the concept of a loyal opposition. And if the Republicans don't want to go along with it, quite frankly, they can go to hell, because they're dragging us there anyway.